Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kisma. I'm Kisma, and today's episode, I'm so excited to have a very special, talented, gifted guest, Dr. Kristina Hallett, who is an executive coach, keynote speaker, board certified psychologist, shamanic healer, and best-selling author of 2 books, Own Best Friend and Be Awesome. So Kristina has so much to share with you today, and we're excited to dive into today's episode, which is entitled Be Awesome with Dr. Kristina Hallett. Hello and welcome to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kisma, bringing you ancient wisdom for modern day success so that you can have the mindset to get your life and business set.
As always, thank you for tuning in. And if you're new to the podcast, take a quick second to hit the subscribe button in iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. If you want to get the inside info for this and every episode, as well as some free gifts, go to illuminationacademy.net/podcasts. And now let's dive in to get your mindset for your life and business set.
Well, hello there, Nick.
Hello there, Kisma.
What's going on?
I'm focused today.
You are. Nick walked into our office here at Common Grounds in Carlsbad, very determined. In fact, I had to cut my cords and not get into, is he okay, not okay? I was just like, what's going on? You're like, good, but very focused.
I'm very focused. I noticed that you had that for a second. You were like, oh, is everything okay with him? I'm like, I'm fine. I'm fine.
I'm like, not my gig, not my gig.
Focused. Cut the cord. I like that. There's always that moment too when the other person is cutting their cords and you're just like, what did I do?
Come on now. We're beyond that. But no, there's been a lot going on. I know I've certainly been busy, had a couple of events, did my Energy Mastery 2-day certification last week at the center with 4 amazing souls, led a Prosperity 1 day the week before. And then what have you been doing?
We've been working on getting some new things out for Energy Mastery.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been pretty exciting. We've been working on an ebook that's coming out. It's a short little ebook that's actually pretty awesome.
I bet it will be.
Yeah, I read it, because of course I did some research and all the experts are like, well, it needs to be this length or it needs to be that length or whatever. And we're like, we went through those things and then we just said, you know what, screw this. We're just going to write an awesome little ebook.
Yeah.
And it is really, really cool. So we worked out quite a bit on that. And then just so many other things. We've been enrolling some new people coming in for Energy Mastery. And that's super cool.
Yeah.
So
great. Beautiful. Well, as our listeners already know, we have a special guest. We don't have guests every week. So you listeners out there that we love and adore, when we bring someone on, they are precious to us. They're interesting. We just know they've got something that will serve and support all of you. So let's get to a very exciting conversation with Dr. Kristina Hallett from Massachusetts. So hello there, Dr. Kristina. How are you?
I'm wonderful. It's so great to talk with you too.
Well, welcome to Illumination Podcast. You and I have briefly met, at least through the ethers, through a group that we're in. And I was able to listen to you give an interview. And I was like, I really want to share your wisdom and your knowledge with our people. So just give us a little overview of what you've been up to lately. I know you've got a couple of books out. You're teaching your classes and your courses. Just kind of give us the mini tell-all of how your life is going right now.
If only I had a way to really condense this, I would be so happy. So I have decided.
Be awesome, right? You're just be awesome.
Exactly. So what I would say is that I am sort of a mind, body, spirit package. I am a board certified clinical psychologist and a professor in a graduate program of psychology at Bay Path University. I also do some psychotherapy and I do coaching with individuals. Right. And then I've trained as a yoga teacher and I practice the shamanic energy healing in the tradition of the Caro of Peru. And I've got 2 books. The first one came out a year ago, Own Best Friend, 8 Steps to a Life of Purpose, Passion, and Ease. And my newest book that just came out in June, Be Awesome, Banish Burnout, Create Motivation from the Inside Out. And
Yeah.
I just I do a lot of speaking, and I love to go out and meet people and talk to people and say, you know what? We all have the opportunity to change the world one person at a time, starting with ourselves.
This is so true. And I think what really I connected with you, I mean, there are three things that we have a little triad of teaching yoga. You know, we had a yoga studio for years, and we sort of joke we teach yoga once a year at our retreat in Michigan. Nick and I are both coaches, and Nick and I both do energy healing. So I love this connection. You know, what I actually love to start with and then move into your books, but if it's okay with you, where did the bridge come or appear for you between the psychotherapy, the clinical psychology, and coaching and healing? Because I know that they're all intertwined for you, but I'd love for you to speak a little bit about that, because I'm always fascinated with the mind, and you seem to have a very interesting perspective of the mind from the inside out.
So it literally happened, I don't know, probably over a decade ago. Well over a decade ago now. I was going to a yoga studio, and yoga was the first place that I actually felt like I was able to slow my mind and do much more mindfulness and meditation. So I really got into yoga because I have one of those minds that's always going really fast. And as I was doing that, there was offered at the yoga studio a session by a shaman on meet your spirit animal. So I went with my two daughters thinking, this will be great entertainment. I also, I had no belief in this whatsoever. And basically I'm like, it's worth $35. Why not? And, seemed like a reasonable thing. And I, at that time, also was not able to do visualization personally. So I was teaching it to people in therapy, but when I tried to visualize, it just didn't work. Anyway, I went to this event, and on the way, I said to my daughters, I really hope my spirit animal is a dolphin. That would be cool. And my oldest got so mad at me, and she's like, it doesn't work that way. Stop it. I'm like, all right, never mind. Whatever.
Oh, those kids.
Right. We began to do the journey, and first we met a spirit guide and then went on to meet our spirit animal. And the piece that really was essential for me was, as they were describing see a spirit guide, I felt as if I saw very clearly an image in my head of a Native American medicine man. And literally my brain started thinking, this is what every single one of the 35 people in this room are seeing. Who wouldn't see that? And so that voice in my head just kept going, running commentary throughout the whole thing. And we were all lying on yoga mats. You go on, meet the spirit animal. The person who's guiding this says, okay, turn around in your mind and see a spirit animal. And I remember thinking, I can't even turn around in my mind. This is ridiculous. And then that's when this thing happened. So I knew and was conscious. I could feel that I was lying on the yoga mat on the floor. I could feel my body, but I felt like something was pushing against my lower back. And I remember thinking, that is so weird. I'm on a yoga mat. How could I feel anything? And I felt it again. So I somehow turned around. I, at the time, couldn't have told you how I did that. And I saw, as clear as day, of course my eyes were closed, a huge cat. And I thought, oh my God, that's a really big cat. I mean, it's not a cat, but it's not a lion, but it's a big cat. So it ended. We all began partnering up with people we didn't know. And I was talking to this woman and describing what I had seen. And there was a lot more to it. But she said, that's a cougar. So I immediately pulled up my phone, Googled pictures of cougars, and thought, that's it. And then saw that a synonym for that was mountain lion. And I'm like, okay, I'm never telling anyone I am a cougar. That did not work for me. So I'm not a cougar. I'm a mountain lion. That's what it is. So the other thing that happened that night was that everyone went around and described what their initial spirit guide was. And no one else in the room talked about seeing the same image of this Native American medicine man that I had seen. So those two things, and the spirit, what was associated with the mountain lion, was directly in line with what was going on in my life and where I wanted to be going, the things I needed to work on. So I was internally intrigued, fascinated, and really wanted to pursue this, but I had to keep it a secret because God knows I was going to lose all credibility as a psychologist if I went around saying, oh yeah, I got a spirit animal and I do this stuff. And, So I spent a couple years sort of, on the down low, like learning about this and going to things, I'd like go for readings, like anyone who offered any kind of reading anywhere. I'm like, oh, let me go in, but shh, don't tell anyone, Like, if I could have worn dark glasses and like a beard, I probably would have.
I love that. Dr. Hallett on the DL.
Exactly. Right. So then literally, and this was another, like these are crystal clear moments for me. So I was lying in bed and it was a Saturday night and I was trying to fall asleep. So naturally I was on Facebook, just sort of scrolling through. And I saw that the same woman who'd done years before that same journey was doing a workshop the next day on intro to shamanism. Mm-hmm. And literally I texted her, I knew her, and said, hey, is there still room? By 11:50 p.m., I was signed up because I had to. Total internal compulsion. Went the next day and had another similar experience, although in this case, she did another animal journey, and I very clearly saw a red-tailed hawk. And then as we were all sitting around talking about it, right by the window goes a red-tailed hawk. I'm like, oh. So she offers immediately, like, hey, she's going to be running a course. You can learn about this. And I sign up because I have to. I go home and tell my husband, hey, by the way, I signed up for this thing. He's like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, I have to do this. And I literally couldn't stop. I then went out to, I forget the name of the place. It's one of the sort of main East Coast places. But there was a workshop that was happening with the Caro from Peru and Alberto Villoldo from Four Winds Society. And I went out and spent a weekend there because I couldn't wait to get into her class. Like I had to be doing stuff. I started reading like a mad woman, listening to anything that I could, and literally became totally immersed in it. What I found through the process and beginning to learn about shamanism and the medicine wheel was that I suddenly had access to self-healing that was entirely different and at a, I want to say in some ways deeper, but certainly alternative level to what I had done in both conducting psychotherapy and doing my own personal therapy. And there was a healing of relationships within my life that was dramatically different than anything I had experienced before. And so literally everything woke up. So now I was there in that place and continued to do training, was in Costa Rica and Peru for a few weeks and Ireland over the next few years, doing more and more training in the tradition of the Caro. Meanwhile, people in my life knew this, and I was starting to do healing work with other people. But I have two offices where my private practice office is, just because we have a suite. So I had like the therapy room and the shamanic healing room.
That's awesome. And, the cave.
Right. So if my therapy clients knew or something came up where it seemed appropriate, I'd share that information, and we'd literally go into the other office and do the shamanic work. And then I had people coming in just for shamanic healing. So I ended up getting a job, moving to being full-time instead of adjunct at the university. And here's the last piece. Like this is where it all really came together. So about a month after I came on full-time, someone came to me and said, hey, would you do a faculty-student forum? And I said, sure, love to. And they said, well, what would you like to talk about? And I said, well, I'd love to do a talk on what psychology and shamanism have in common. They said, absolutely. Sounds great. I went home and told my family and my friends, and literally 100% of everyone I knew said, what is wrong with you? Why are you committing career suicide before you've been there for 6 months? And I said, this is who I am. So they either want me for who I am and how I am as a whole integrated person, or they don't.
And that gives me the chills.
Right. So, and like I have a major shamanic painting that's in my office. I have the Florida water that I make myself in sacred space that people come to me and buy like out of my office. They're like, oh, we will have to come. There's, crystals and stuff everywhere. So it's not like it's a secret. And it ended up being a phenomenally well attended form. People loved it. And the university loved it so much that they put me on the spirituality committee. That they're like, oh, anytime they were doing supporting an integrated medicine program, they sent me to Spain to be a part of that. They totally embraced it. So each one of those, there were sort of these very particular events that were the internal bridge for me to say, open up and accept who and how you are. And that's what makes a difference.
Was that your debutante ball? Was that the moment that you really came out of, came out of hiding with that? That's a big moment for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I don't think just professionally for you, I think the stakes were a little bit higher, but for a lot of people, they're having this conversation kind of in the background of their head, and they're not really sure how to come out of the closet, so to speak, and actually let this be a part of their life. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So and I agree completely, Nick. So in my personal life, I had come out, as soon as I started doing the training, I was telling everyone. And one night, my husband and I went to dinner with another couple, and they were asking something, and they sort of said to me, what'd you do today? And I said, oh my God, I went on this shamanic journey, and I started telling them about this really wild experience I had. And my husband, who is not a practitioner of any of the energetic healing arts, but has come to finally a position of supporting me, sort of started mocking me and was giving me the slashing hand at the throat, knock it off, stop. I finished my story anyway. And as we drove home, he's like, what are you doing? They don't want to hear that. I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. I don't care. He's like, no, they were uncomfortable. I'm like, no, you were uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I am talking, I can only live as me. So that had been happening. I shared it with my family. I would offer to do, chakra clearings for my family or all sorts of stuff. And it was very surprising who in my life really was interested and who absolutely sort of rejected it. And my mom was someone who became very open to this and to having me do healing with her because of the connection to nature. And that really resonated with her. Whereas younger people who you thought might have been more open were like, yeah, whatever, you're weird, Mom. So see you later.
Yeah. Well, I have found that with my daughter. We put her through my energy mastery training in New York City. And she was like, she's incredible. She doesn't realize how talented she is. But she'll kind of be like, yeah. Then every now and then I get this, hey, Mom, can you do that thing? Or can you work on my friend? It's in the back of their head. They know it's a secret weapon that they can call upon. And I think in their own time, they start to use it. It's so cute. So this seems like an amazing theme. And because it seems like so many people have that thing that they might have fear about sharing. And it might not be as expansive and as big as it was for you to go out and teach and talk about it, or it could be an even bigger. Yet I think so many humans have that element where, well, if I talk about this or I share this, what are people going to think? And I know I just get very tired. I know the people that come here to work with me just get very tired of living in that box of being worried what other people think. And so my question for you was this when you wrote Be Your Own Best Friend? Did that happen before or after? Because it seems like once you embraced it, you were your best friend. You were your number one supporter.
Yeah, Own Best Friend definitely came after all of that. And that was literally the issue that I was working on that was the most clear and apparent issue to work on about what does it mean to walk my talk and be authentically who I am and not worry about what other people think. I had lots of other examples in my life of where I was influenced and made choices based on what I thought or knew other people thought. And so for decades, literally, I was working on trying to be okay just about me. And this became a really very clear point in which I said, this isn't something I'm willing to give up. I've given up all sorts of other things or, choices, ways of being, but this just mattered to me deep in my soul. And it made sense even when it didn't make sense. And suddenly I was able to visualize. I'm like, wow, look at that,
Right.
15 years of psychological training and I can't visualize a thing. And now I can whoa, there's something going on here. And But for me, it was bringing together the science and the spirituality, or, I talk about the coaching work I do is bringing science and soul together because I had such a strong science background. And so I needed to find a way to allow both of those two to support and expand each other to get a greater product. The more I was willing and open to doing that and to sort of saying like, this isn't about control and you don't have to know everything. And like faith becomes an important piece, right? So both the grounding and the opening up, it just became easier. And then by the time I made that direct professional sort of disclosure, everybody in my life knew, and I mean, that had been going on for years. So, like, well, like the person who is my immediate supervisor had known I did that stuff. And they could have told me no too. I'm like, well, did they either say no or they say yes? Like,
And I love how it's like, they'll refer to as that stuff or that thing, what's that?
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering if you can, I think this is a kind of a gray area for some people, is around the differentiation between, well, what is coaching and what is what is actual psychology? And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that. Do you still segment that in your practice, or are these things really coming together in more of a conglomeration of all the different experiences that you have? Like, how do you work that in your practice and with your clients?
Yeah. So my answer is yes and no, right? So there are some people that I see exclusively for psychotherapy. An example is that I work with people with dissociative identity disorder. So people with severe trauma histories and what used to be known as multiple personality disorder. So for those people, there's a very specific need for psychotherapy. It's something I have expertise in. Not a lot of people have expertise in it. While you might at times use a coaching technique, it's very clearly, insurance paid psychotherapy. And the way that I differentiate psychotherapy and coaching in general is that psychotherapy, you're sort of coming in saying, I have a particular problem. So if you think of better than neutral and below neutral, you're coming in below neutral and you want to get up to neutral. And then we talk about using the techniques of positive psychology to move into a better than neutral place, right? Sort of that life worth living idea. But it's still very much seeing yourself as coming in with a very particular issue that needs some specialized training and understanding to address. It encompasses in many ways what your entire life experiences have been, often in some detail. But when I think about coaching, for me, and I have a very particular model that I'll use, I'll say something about that. But when I think about coaching, it's somebody who understands that they're okay where they are, but they're stuck and they want more. So it's not coming in so much from a problem focus, but it's saying, I'm in a stuck place and I want to move past that. Or I am where I am, maybe I'm not stuck, but I know I have a sense that there's more and I want to get to that more. So I want to be the kind of person who blah, 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 whatever it is they want to do.
Right.
And often they're coming in, like that's a place, particularly when I'm working with executives in industries, they're coming in saying, I feel burnt out. So they're not coming in saying like, I'm horrifically depressed and I've got to do this work on getting over depression, but it's that things are not working well for me. And yet they're willing to see themselves, at least to some degree, as coming from a place of health. And then the work that I do, when I can't forget my psychological knowledge, so that doesn't go away. So for me, that's the yes and no, Nick. It's all one. Yeah. Like I know what I know, so I can't separate them. But what I know is different than maybe what some other coaches know because of my 26 years working in the field. And I do a lot of reading in the literature. And so bringing in what are the newest techniques and ways to work with things. But in my coaching, I don't really get too much into people's life history, their background, things like that. They come in, they say, I have a goal. And I say, great. And my model is literally sort of an 8-session model. The time frame is determined, with the person that I'm working with. So they figure out how often they want to do those 8 sessions. But I have a very particular way I want to feel, be, and live at the end of those 8 sessions. And that's what it is. There's no year-long back end any of that kind of stuff. I'm ready to get it done.
Desire to go.
Yeah, I'm ready to get it done. I'm willing to work hard, and we're going to use some very particular techniques and work on shifts in things like mindset and approach and self-awareness and knowledge, all of the things I ultimately talk about in my books. But let's do this at an accelerated pace. So that's the other thing. For me, psychotherapy often takes a lot longer because people don't necessarily have that same investment in dramatic change right now, and don't necessarily have the resources, even emotionally, to enter into that. So they're sort of maybe working to get to neutral and then going into overdrive.
Yeah. What comes to mind is just a question around this. Do you use the chart of frequency from Power versus Force at all? The David Hawkins, if from shame on up, those different emotions.
Oh, not specifically, but I would say yes.
It makes me ponder when someone's coming in, say for coaching, they're all, we talk about how they want to at least get to willingness. Like there's a willingness to, okay, there's got to be change. And so that frequency lies there. And when someone perhaps is coming to you for psychotherapy or healing, it could be a different frequency where you've got to get their head above water in order to see.
Exactly.
Yeah, we see this with, at least I can speak, people that come to me specifically for healing or for coaching, because I agree with you. I want rapid results. I want people to be able to fly and get out there and be able to use the tools on their own. So I totally appreciate that.
Yeah, it's just like, go live your life. Like that's why you're here. Live it. Go do it.
Right.
Yeah. You brought up a really interesting topic, I think, around emotional resourcefulness and emotional resiliency as well. And it seems to me that at a certain point when people are bobbing below water and really struggling at that moment to just feel like they can breathe, that emotional resourcefulness really tends to, when they have a lack of that, it really tends to sap them out.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you can talk about maybe a little bit more of like, well, what is that experience? Like if that's happening in your life, like you might not even realize it. You might just think that something's wrong with you, or you might, be looking at other people or things like that. Like what are some of the telltale signs that that's going on?
That you're really starting to sort of get into that below the water place.
Yeah.
One of the things is, and this in many ways may sound more like a description of depression, but I think that there's a sense of increased self-criticalness, right? Internal thoughts become more negative. Often there's a sense of maybe sort of blah, things just don't seem
like
as
complacency.
Either complacency or stagnant or like meh. What I think of is like MEH, meh.
Yeah, okay. Unengaged.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That there's some disconnection from other people, that often people describe to me a feeling of something's missing, very much they're just like, I don't really know what it is. Or, alternatively, I'll hear people say, I know what to do, but I can't do it. And they'll say, I just don't have the energy to do it.
Right.
I can't get that to happen. And that's not always because a person is depressed. But I think that all of those together, and often what I would say is not if you're not at a place of accepting who you are and like understanding that every single human being by nature of being human is flawed and imperfect, and that's fabulous. And that anything can change and grow, but you will still always be flawed and fabulous. And so usually they don't have that understanding. So it's piling up on something's wrong with me, I'm not good enough. And this hopelessness is what I think tends to happen. And sometimes people have talked to me about they feel like they're treading water and they're drifting further from the shore. They're getting tired.
Right. Do you think some of that, like not willing to accept the fab and flawed or flawless, even with what, I always look at as like, we're perfect and there's going to be imperfect actions. But is it because, from a very early age, we've been kind of put in a condition box? The teachers will say, you've got to sit this way, you've got to dress this way, you've got to write your letters this way. parents, for whatever reason, they want the best. Most parents want the best for their children, yet there are guidelines, there are ways of having to be. And I agree, like as many different humans are as many different iterations. So over the years, over the time, do you find that conditioned personality, so to speak, that box just prevents people from seeing how magnificent they are if they're not following that practicum of how their teachers or parents said they should?
I do. I think that that's very true. The other thing is I've been doing some of the reading by Carol Dweck, if you're familiar with her book about mindset. And if you think just for a minute about fixed mindset and growth mindset, we're really conditioned, particularly as children, and very much so in the U.S., sort of mainstream U.S. culture, is school and achievement, right? And that's all worth and fixed mindset all get tied together.
Right.
And so what I see that generations, literally multiple generations of people whose sort of core issue, I think, comes down to some version of not good enough, and that's come about through whatever their combination of experiences was that leads them to needing to follow certain rules to sort of live in that box and to be assessed by, like, if you get an A, good for you.
Yeah.
And if you get lower than an A, you have to try harder or it's not good enough. Like that we sort of put these together. And quite frankly, if you went, for example, to Peru and up into the mountains and talked to the Caro people, like it doesn't even exist. There's no concept of not good enough. It's like there's us as humans and there's nature and we're all connected and everything is perfect as it is.
And it's interesting because that it's the whole quest, right? It's an external gratification. All of the external gratifications that our senses get stuck onto and start following, when the truth is internal. That quest is internal, so it can become very confusing for people. And when you were talking earlier about that resistance, it felt like resistance when you were talking about it and you broke through or dissolved it about, this is who I am. Like, I'm not Dr. Hallett on the DL. I am full on doing. Do you see that resistance a lot with people, that it's just like, it's that point where if they can get through that, above it, beyond it, through it, that's when the magic starts to happen?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, so for me, sort of the key growth element that I'm looking to help people get to is what I would call awareness and acceptance. That those are the sort of beginning places, and being willing to look at yourself with compassion and objectivity together and say, like, so this is it. Like this, and it's neither good nor bad. That was one of the things I learned in the shamanic training, was that there's what serves us and what doesn't serve us, but that's not good or bad. It's just, serve us or not. When I was explaining to my mom initially in my shamanic training, she was saying, what do you mean by you clear out energy? You mean that you're taking out bad energy? And I said, no, Mom, what I'm doing is shifting out energy that's no longer serving you. And then I described it to her as, think of it as like energetic or spiritual compost, because composting benefits the entire universe. And so that's all we're doing with the energy, is we're taking it out and we're composting it so that the whole world benefits. Just because it's not what's serving you at the moment doesn't mean it doesn't have a fabulous place of belonging within the universe.
That's a really beautiful way to put it. We call it Poopyville.
There you go.
Cleaning up that stuff. Yeah. I'd like to turn a little bit more, because we brushed on it, but I'd like to dive in a little bit deeper to the up and coming generation. And I think I see a lot, I should say anyway, that the millennials get a little bit of a bad rap, but I think they're in a very unique position in a lot of different ways. And to go along with that, I do see for sure a waking up, a raising of consciousness and awareness in a unique perspective. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what you see as the opportunities and the challenges for our up and coming generation, our leaders of the future, and people who are coming into a world that is moving faster than ever. And what do you see there?
Yeah. So I'll start with what I see as the biggest challenge. And that I think that the biggest challenge is connection, human to human connection.
I couldn't agree more.
Right. And I love technology. I like my laptop died the other day and I immediately went out and got a new one. I'm like, oh, I have to have it. I embrace technology, but I'm fortunate. I was in a generation in which there was no internet and no technology. And so I really know the value and the power of human to human connection. Mm-hmm. And ideally, in many ways, face to face and being in the physical presence of other humans, but even speaking over the phone. So something other than just the visual, but bringing in the other senses. Right? Mm-hmm. So the hearing of another human and the energy that we share by being kinesthetically in the same physical presence. I think that's extraordinarily important. And I think that's the hardest challenge because, literally I've had my youngest say to me, well, I don't like to talk on the phone. I'll send you a text because it's easier, but I don't really want to talk. I'm like, wow, Hey, funny thing, but like relationships and connections are actually built on sharing. It's awfully hard to share without ever talking. And I think that also has led to, in some ways, much broader boundaries, less limits, maybe that's a better way to put it, less limits in some of the things that people share that in face-to-face and in-person conversations, you would be less likely. An example is internet cyberbullying is an example. Someone wouldn't say that to you. They wouldn't even say it directly to another person behind your back, but they'll say it through the mechanism of typing.
Right.
So that's where I see the biggest challenge, but where I see a phenomenal opportunity is the willingness to continue to grow, the creativity, the sort of explosion of technology and the willingness to, there's not even the same box that they're thinking of. Like my thoughts and a millennial's thoughts in terms of what's possible in using some of those things, there's no comparison because they're envisioning things like I couldn't envision the internet. So,
that is so cool, and if they take that power of the infinite through technology and then transfer it back to the power of the infinite and limitlessness of the human. That's where we went the full circle, right? I remember talking to some students the other night and I was like, look, our phones now speak to each other telepathically, airdrop, and we have that power as well. When we're willing to be clear enough, cleansed enough, focused, even accepting, that level of communication is available to humans. We've just clouded it over so many centuries.
Yeah. They've clouded it and they don't have a sequence to get to that. Like
That's
you need
true.
a program and a sequence.
To unlock it.
The technology is modeled after us, right? And so that sequence to unlock that as well is really important.
Yeah, it's good little tidbit there for
I
marketing.
That was good.
We'll all be doing
Very good.
Oh, this is so amazing. Kristina, would you share, you have 2 books, Be Awesome and Own Best Friend. Which one's your favorite?
Truthfully, Be Awesome is my favorite.
Yeah,
although,
tell us why.
Well, I have to say, so Own Best Friend was my first one. And when the physical books were delivered, I literally took them out of the box, spread them all around me on the bed, and took a selfie, like covered in my books. And it has, quite frankly, abnormally soft cover, which I did not know that there were differences in the covers of paperback books. But this one is
like that soft touch, the velvety touch.
Yes.
Oh, I love that.
So I pick it up and I'll like rub it against my cheek. So it's my first baby book, and it has all these qualities about it. I was going to write a different book and then wrote that. And for years, I knew I was going to write something that was called Be Awesome, but I had a totally different idea. Much of that is actually in Own Best Friend. Having completed doing Own Best Friend and really stepping back and looking at my life and all of those people over 26 years that I've worked with and sort of saying, like, what are some of the deeper things that we need to get to? So Own Best Friend it's got very specific steps, and every chapter in the Empowers acronym has exercises, and AWESOME is set up the same way. AWESOME is also an acronym. Own Best Friend is sort of like the above ground swimming pool, and Be Awesome is swimming in the ocean.
That's awesome. I love that. It is awesome. And we'll have links to both books in our show notes, everyone. So please check that out. And they're great. I'm enjoying Own Best Friend right now.
It's really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a conversation topic that's come up several, because we have people who are interested in spirituality, expanding consciousness, all these sorts of things. And I think I have a feeling you're going to bring a really unique perspective to this part of the conversation with your background in shamanic healing. And it's about drugs and the role of drugs, or the non-role of drugs, in higher spirituality, expanding consciousness, and how, like, I'm just really curious to hear your thoughts on it. Does it have a place? Does it not have a place? And if so, what might that be?
Yeah. So actually, I'm glad you said that, because I want to clarify. There are shamanic practices that utilize plant medicine and ayahuasca, things like peyote, things like that. My training does not involve plant medicine, so I'm not an expert in that. And that's not something that's been a part of my experience, although I have nothing against it in and of itself. However, so I can't speak to having done, like, using ayahuasca in my training, but during my time in Peru, I saw this one particular artist who would use ayahuasca in a very specific and spiritual way, and then create these masterpiece paintings that were phenomenal reflections of his ayahuasca experiences. And I absolutely believe that there is a place for the use of guided spiritual and sacred plant healing by experts. What I feel differently about is that there are also sort of that, hey, I want to go try it out and just see what it's like. And and this is, in many ways, or at least in the tradition of the Q'ero or any of the other South American shamanic practices, it's a spiritual practice. I mean, it's the equivalent of taking communion. You know, so it's not just like, hey, you know, I've got nothing to do. So sort of my attitude of like, hey, what's $35 to go meet your spirit animal? Okay, pretty disrespectful. And, you know, I was treating it as entertainment. And I don't think that plant medicine is entertainment.
Yeah,
I think
it's got to be respected.
Right. You know, and I actually had someone call me up a few months ago and said, hey, we'd really like you to do a whole shamanic workshop. I've got a group of people together. I'd love to do that, do those all the time. Said, sure. But it turned out what they really wanted was to just use ayahuasca. I'm like, nope, no. Like,
interesting.
You know, so that's where I come from, just in my own tradition. And so I think that from a psychological perspective, I think that the use of drugs it's a tightrope, you know? And I've known people who have, for a whole variety of reasons, used different kinds of drugs to try to get to different kinds of places, particularly spiritual places. And there's those who've similarly used a variety of drugs for avoidance. And I think there's a major difference between, I want to feel differently than how I feel, avoidance, and I want to try to utilize something. I mean, I play, you know, I'll rattle or drum or listening to CDs to go do my journeys. So I'm utilizing a tool to have an experience.
Right.
So I think that there's a place for tools, but that they need to be, you know, monitored and careful and respected and treated with dignity and honor.
Right. Yeah. And to understand, it's like, Nick, when we did that breathing experience in India.
The rebirthing.
Yeah, it is an experience. Whoa. And that was one of the things the teacher was really great. She goes, you just had an experience. You could do that with this. You could do it with drugs, but it is an external experience.
Yeah.
And, you know, that real passage, I think it is in the internal. And I get it. Sometimes those external things can help. It's part of the pathway for many people.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I see is okay, excuse me. So a little bit was good, and maybe I'll do that more, you know, and then before you know it, they're doing like spirit journeys every weekend. And I just don't know about that. You know, I think it's spiritual experiences are so incredibly powerful, like true spiritual experiences are so powerful, that there is a time to really unpack that and integrate it in a healthy way that really brings it into your being and your life. And when it's constantly going back for that same thing, I think again, it becomes about that external experience. And then there's the whole energetic level. I look at it energetically, and certainly like what it does, the mind is another aspect of that, but energetically, how it can really distort the field, and it can certainly release a lot of things that were lying dormant there. And where are those things going? So I just cracked up in my head when they said, "Oh, well, we'd like," they kind of want you to lead the experience for them, with ayahuasca, and which is essentially in my mind is like, okay, I want you to be responsible for all the crazy stuff that comes out of me I go do this drug. It's like, I think I'm good.
Past.
Oh, that's great. That's amazing.
Thanks for entertaining that question. It's been an ongoing conversation. I just think it's interesting, and I know that it's something that a lot of people explore. And certainly I did in my earlier days, but not from the consciousness expanding perspective. I was more in the avoidance side of things in those earlier days. So.
I was actually doing a shamanic energy healing with someone earlier today. And so that was their first experience. So I usually give people some explanation of sort of what I'm doing, et cetera. And so I have a variety of different tools, instruments, whatever, rattles and different crystals, and I don't even know how to describe some of them, but a variety of tools that I use. And I was showing them to this individual and saying, look, all these are is a way to focus my brain. Like, I don't need any of them. It's, there's pomp and circumstance and show, and that has some potential impact on myself and others. But really, the energetic work has nothing to do with these tools. Like, you don't need any of them. It's the work that you're doing by connecting to the universal energy and the universal unconscious, and then energetically working with the other person. But sometimes it's really easy to have a guide. I think about someone I knew who was really looking to do sort of a cleansing and a purification, and they chose to do that through a sacred ayahuasca ceremony. And so there was a very clear purpose. They did the fasting beforehand. They did the particular work with the shaman who was running that. It was a very different purpose-driven experience to address something that needed to be addressed.
Yeah, it's almost like, and I know we're running out of time, but what you shared, it reminds me of like sometimes the brain will need a reason or a direction, like that external thing, whether it's a geometric code, a rattle, like you said, the pomp and circumstance. Yeah, the soul's like, come on, let's just go. Like, let's just do this, people. Yeah. And I think, that's the beauty of we kind of have to merge those worlds sometimes for people.
I see how I see the sense of ritual is really, again, as it's a sequence to get the brain on board and get everybody on board and in line to do what you're there to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And ritual is very powerful, but it's very Vedanta, what you said, Kristina, of the tools, the rituals, all these, they represent something that take you towards the higher, but they're not the thing. Right. They're absolutely not the thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
I think that our human brains look for frameworks. And so I think that's what that serves, is like, here's a framework so you can exactly go from point A to point B to point C and conceptualize it, as opposed to not having a way in which to narrow your conceptualization to get to this other connection. If you
haven't. Yeah, so good. Hey, I have a question for you before we sign off. And again, listeners, you can find links to Dr. Hallett's books on our show notes, illuminationacademy.net/INK116. Or search the podcast, iTunes. Well, you're listening, so you've obviously already searched. So thank you, everyone. Kristina, for you, I like to ask our guests this question. Is there anything that you desire to do that you've not yet done and you haven't really told anybody?
Wow. So if you had asked me this 10 years ago, I could have given you a really long list. And today, I don't have anything right now,
That's
but
so cool.
I have the feeling that new ideas and experiences are going to come up. And so here's my quick little thing that I do, is that I'll be presented with something new or that I want to do or had wanted to do. And I'll get this really sort of tight feeling in my chest and I'll basically feel like I want to vomit. At which point I know, oh, this is the thing. Like, this is the growing edge. That's how that's the risk to take. And so I do that. And, my commitment to myself is that every time that comes up, I say yes. So I don't have anything that's lingering out there right at the moment because I've now, for me, here's my two things recently. I've traveled to other countries where I don't speak the language by myself. And I achieved a lifetime high of asking someone for help 5 days in a row.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing. I love it. Way to go. Well, when the other one comes, shoot me a text. I'm just curious. Like, you're so fascinating. I went in on it.
Right. Because there's going to be something. Like, I just know that. And so I'm really open to whatever it's going to be because the universe provides.
Absolutely. You're so precious, Kristina. Thank you for being here with us. We could do this for hours. Like, you're just one of our peeps. We could go on for hours.
Yeah, without a doubt.
I love talking to you guys. Yeah, this is fabulous. I listen to your podcast and I could just sit here all day long and talk to you. So yes, cut me off.
And hopefully we'll be seeing each other in person soon, possibly in New York in the fall, if not sooner. And so much love and many blessings. And thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Hey, thanks for jamming with us today. And if you enjoy Illumination Podcast, please go ahead and share it with someone you love. Give us a rating, review, download our podcast. And remember, you can find us at illuminationacademy.net/podcasts. Talk to you soon. Namaste.